Hello, good morning. Welcome to this online event on opportunities for coal regions under the Just Transition Mechanism. We will be focusing on the EU's novel Just Transition Mechanism and its three pillars. My name is Nicolas de la Vega from the European Association of Renewable Energy Research Centers in Brussels, or EUREC. I will be your moderator for this session. This session is organized by the Horizon 2020 project TRACER, that you will hear a little bit more about from the first speaker. I'd like to thank the participants for joining. We have a good mix from the registrations list from stakeholders from coal regions in transition. We also have universities, we have energy experts, we have industry federations, and also civil society organizations. I would also like to thank the three speakers for agreeing to present today. This is a topic of high interest and high importance for the transition out of coal. And before giving the floor to the first speaker, I would like to just give a couple of practical points. So this event is recorded. And we will upload the video and the slides after the event. So if you want to view it or share it, I would like to ask all participants to save the questions until the end for the Q&A session. You can ask the questions either orally, but if you want to do so, please raise your hand, or you can also use the chat box that is below. It's roughly in the middle of the screen below. If you want to share any other links or comments, please do so in the chat. And without further ado, I would like to introduce our first speaker, who will be giving a welcome and an introduction. This is Rita Merkner. She's a senior project manager at WIP Renewables in Munich. She coordinates also the TRACER project. And before that, she has worked in Brussels for the European Biogas Association and also for the permanent representation for Lithuania to the EU. So the floor is yours, Rita.
Good morning. I hope you can hear me and also see me. I'm glad to see a number of stakeholders. Many of them are well known, our partners or our coal regions in transition friends, which we meet in different events. I'm very glad that we have this nice webinar focused on financing, because it's one of our TRACER project topics. So I will just shortly, I have 5 minutes time to make a very short introduction. And I think most of us know the TRACER project. It is a coordination support action, and we are in the end phase of our project. So we will finalize all actions by the end of September this year. We are a consortium of 15 project partners from 9 coal regions in transition. So we also have a project partner in Ukraine. They cannot attend the webinar today, but we think of them and we remain in close contact with them. Also, just to say that the main TRACER objectives in this project are, of course, to talk to the local stakeholders, to regional actors, and develop new research innovation strategies. Also think about best practice examples that we can promote, and also investigate different kind of challenges that coal regions in transition face. But at the end of the project, we are in a situation that we need to think at the end of the 3 years of project duration, what ideas do we have? What projects could be really interesting for the regions, but also fitting in the Just Transition Mechanism? And also, yes, how to match make these ideas with relevant stakeholders towards financing, kicking off some concrete steps. So I think the most important is at the end of this project to kick off new ideas and think how these ideas could be financed, because the regions need innovation. we have visited Jiu Valley a couple of weeks ago, and we met local stakeholders. We could really feel the region and the needs, and stakeholders are ready, but they need also support from their local governments, national governments, and also yes, financial opportunities to implement new ideas in the region. So many ideas exist, but also the stakeholders are not fully aware everywhere what kind of opportunities are really on the table and how they could, you know, become active. So that's why this webinar is very important for us. And also we know that the just transition mechanism is a key tool to ensure that the transition happens in a fair way and by leaving no one behind. And it is important to really ensure the actions that the local stakeholders are not left behind. And this requires quite some efforts from relevant regional, national level stakeholders. So I think that's why it is important to discuss what are the opportunities so that the local stakeholders can think about it and also ask the questions. Just also showing a small map of our regions. So we are very different regions. Some are more advanced, some are less advanced. And we, of course, cope now new situation, how fast the coal phase out will come in this new context. So we have to see it and still discuss, but the priorities remain on research and innovation in our project, because without new ideas, without new try to implement innovative projects, we will not have these new opportunities for our regions. That's why I think it is important to discuss and really start thinking about concrete ideas and financing of these ideas, because money is an issue in the end. So that's all from my side. I'm very glad that we can discuss. And yes, I would like to encourage all stakeholders to ask the questions and make the best out of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Rita, for that introduction. I concur. There's a lot of interest from stakeholders on finance and how we can drive this transition forward. I would like to move to the second speaker, Sander Happerts. He's a policy officer at the Director General for Regional Policy in the European Commission. He's a policy coordinator. He's the policy coordinator of the Just Transition Fund. He's a research fellow also at the Catholic University of Leuven, where he was a researcher and a lecturer on global environmental politics. And we look forward to your presentation. You have 15 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much. I hope you can hear me and see the presentation. Very happy to speak to you today about the Just Transition mechanism. I will not enter into much of the basics because I assume you know some of it, but I will focus really on explaining to you where we are now in the process, because when you're interested in how the financing will work, it's important to understand what we are doing now in the Commission with the Just Transition mechanism. And I would really also be very interested in reading your final results of the projects once you have it. So the Just Transition mechanism is a pillar of the European Green Deal, which is focused on leaving no one behind. And when the Just Transition mechanism, and in particular the Just Transition Fund, was created, it was decided to put it in the portfolio of cohesion policy, and this is quite important to remember. So this is a policy that is already several decades old, which basically it's the biggest investment policy of the Union. It implements 1/3 of the EU budget in investments in all EU regions, but focused more on the less developed regions, and its role in the European Green Deal in the coming years will really be about investing in place-based innovation. So this is linked to smart specialization that was already mentioned before, but also in the deployment on a large scale of these innovations. So for instance, when it comes to energy efficiency, renewable energy, and a circular economy and others, it will help regions phase out of unsustainable practices and ensure a just transition for all regions. So in the current multi-annual financial framework, the policy is delivered through the funds that we already had, so the European Regional Development Fund, the Cohesion Fund, and the European Social Fund Plus, and now also the Just Transition Fund. The Just Transition Fund is one of the 3 pillars of the Just Transition mechanism. I will focus today mostly on that pillar, on the fund, which is in current prices 19.2 billion euros. And then I suppose later on we will speak also about one of the other pillars. But what I wanted to really stress here by showing you this slide is that the territorial just transition plans that we are now negotiating with all the member states are the key that open the door for all 3 pillars. So this is really quite important to remember when we speak about these territorial just transition plans. When it comes to the first pillar, the Just Transition Fund, these are the allocations per member state. And these are the regions that from the start, let's say, are eligible from receiving the Just Transition Fund. What I want to stress here is that the Just Transition Fund and the Just Transition mechanism is not only for coal regions. So in fact, the coal regions are one of 2 types of regions that will receive the Just Transition Fund. The other type of regions is what we call the carbon-intensive regions. These are regions that are heavily dependent on carbon-intensive industries such as steel, cement, chemicals, glass, paper. And contrary to the coal industries, these industries are not expected to decline or to disappear or to close down, but they are expected to significantly transform. And this will also have an impact which the Just Transition Fund will help alleviating. When it comes to the coal regions, you know, of course, better than I what kind of challenges these regions face. But also here it's important to remember that for us it is about coal and lignite, but also about oil shale in Estonia and also about peat in Ireland, Latvia, and Finland. What you see on the map are the regions that the Commission originally proposed as part of the European semester country reports in 2020 as the regions that should receive the JTF. But as part of the JTF negotiations, the territorial scope of the JTF is also one of the issues that we discuss with member states. So several member states have requested us to extend the geographical scope of the Just Transition Fund in their member state. And this is something that we are open to discuss, and it is part of the ongoing negotiations that we're having now on the territorial just transition plans. But these extra regions, if you will, so in addition to what the Commission has proposed, should still be either coal regions that are dependent on an industry that is in decline, or carbon intensive regions that are dependent on industries that face these types of transformation, and which as a consequence of this transition face a negative social and economic impact. So this will is still the criterion that we look at when we accept such regions. Now, when discussing what we are doing now with all member states, the territorial just transition plans, we are looking at whether these plans, these draft plans, are in line with the JTF regulation. And this means that the key intervention logic of the Just Transition Fund needs to be explained in those plans. And this is really the core of our discussions now with all member states. So what is this intervention logic about? It starts by describing at national level the transition process towards a climate neutral economy, including a timeline with milestones towards 2030 and 2050 targets. So this means that in the first part of the territorial just transition plan, member states obviously commit to the 2030 and 2050 targets, and they explain how they will reach these targets targets at national level. In a second step, the plans should then show whether this transition process at national level has a negative impact at a territorial level. So in the territories that are impacted by the transition, and these would then be the territories that can receive support from the Just Transition Fund. So the national transition process should have a negative impact at the level of that specific region or regions by 2030 or before. This can be a social impact. So for instance, when coal mines or coal power plants close, there will be a loss of jobs. But also in the carbon intensive industries, there can be a need for reskilling, because producing low carbon steel is something completely different than producing traditional steel, for instance. There can be also an economic impact as the result of these transformations that the broader supply chain and related industries have an impact, but there can also be, in several cases, a demographic or an environmental impact. These impacts will be different for each region. So this is why in the specific territorial Just Transition Plan, these impacts need to be described, and they need to, of course, be the consequence of the transition process at national level. And then in a third step, the plans will explain which kinds of investments this particular region needs to alleviate the impacts, which will be, as I said, different for each region. What the JTF regulation explains is that the primary objectives of the Just Transition Fund in terms of investments should be towards reskilling the people, but also the economic diversification of the region, because the Just Transition Fund is really there to help the people and the places that are affected by the transition towards climate neutrality. But the Just Transition Fund regulation also says that other types of investment, and I list some here, like renewable energy, circular economy, could also be funded by the Just Transition Fund if it is clear from the plan that these investments are needed to alleviate the negative impacts of the transition. So this is the kind of thing that we are expecting to see in the territorial Just Transition plans, and this is what we are discussing now with member states. Where are we now? So in fact, the negotiations on the Just Transition plans, they form part of the broader negotiations of the cohesion policy programs that we are now having with member states. For the JTF, we are expecting around 40 different programs. So this can be one program for the entire member state that has different funds. It can be one specific JTF program, or it can be regional programs. So this really depends on how the member states have their institutional structure. And linked to these programs, we are expecting about 75 territorial Just Transition plans. This does not mean 75 regions, because in some member states we have one territorial Just Transition plan that covers several regions. So this again depends really on each different member state. For instance, 14 territorial Just Transition plans will come from Finland. There are several member states, you see them here on this slide: Austria, Cyprus, Czech Republic, Germany, France, Greece, the Netherlands, Poland, and Sweden, who have already submitted their TJTPs formally to the Commission. And the Commission is now assessing them. So this means that we are examining these plans, we are sending comments back to the member states, they need to revise them according to our comments, and then afterwards, when we are happy with the revised versions, we can adopt them as part of the cohesion policy programs, and then the implementation can start. For the other member states, in many of the cases, we are already discussing draft versions as well, but these draft versions have not been formally submitted yet. This means that the clock has not started ticking according to the regulation and the deadlines that the Commission then has to revise them. But we are expecting most of the other territorial Just Transition plans to be submitted also by mid of this year. So many member states are really now in the last stages of preparing them. I want to share a few of our thoughts from reading the territorial just transition plans or the draft versions until now. We have really seen an impressive investment by local stakeholders to help prepare those plans. We have seen some regions really coming with very ambitious visions, so not only explaining how they are negatively affected by the transition, but also how they want to make use of the Just Transition Fund and other mechanisms to really gain from the transition and transform themselves into a new green energy region, for instance. Also, the carbon intensive regions have some of them have really presented very ambitious pathways. In terms of things that we think should still be improved, much of it is related to the JTF intervention logic that I showed you earlier, that in many cases, according to us, this should be really more targeted towards really addressing the impacts of the transition and not other, let's say, more general development issues, because for that, of course, the other funds remain still available like it was the case in the past. In many plans, the skills dimension and actually the social dimension remains a little bit underdeveloped, and also not in many cases the relevant stakeholders have been involved, or at least this is not clear to us, because the partnership principle is really a key principle of cohesion policy. This was always the case in the past, and I would say it is even more important for the Just Transition Fund, because we really want the stakeholders from the ground to be around the table when the future of their region is being discussed. So this means, for instance, trade unions, but it also means youth, it means research institutions, it means civil society, NGOs. They should really be involved both in the development, but also in the implementation of the territorial Just Transition plans. And this needs to be demonstrated in the plans, and when we are not happy with that demonstration, with that description, we are challenging the member states to improve it. At the EU level, we also take this partnership principle close to heart. That is why we established the Just Transition platform. The Just Transition platform consists, first of all, of 2 high-level events a year. We are now preparing the 5th event, which will take place from the 10th to the 12th of May, at which you are all invited. It will still be a fully online event, and the invitations will be sent in the next couple of days. And it is really a very good moment to share knowledge. We will have thematic sessions on specific issues that are important for the implementation of the JTF. So it's really quite an interesting event, and I hope to see many of you there. But as part of the Just Transition platform, we are also establishing a new website with a dedicated help to all stakeholders on how to access the support of the Just Transition mechanism. We have working groups that we established specifically for the carbon intensive regions. When it comes to the coal regions in transition, there was already an initiative ongoing led by DG NR, which is now also part, or let's say, brought under the umbrella of the Just Transition platform. So also the event is merged with the Coal Regions in Transition virtual week. This slide is just to say that, of course, the Just Transition Fund with its 19.2 billion, it will never be enough to cover all the needs that the regions have. This is why it's very important to continuously think about the complementarities and the use of the other funds. In particular, the other cohesion policy funds, because they are, of course, much larger. So as soon as the investments are not really clearly targeted towards alleviating the consequence of the transition, we believe they should be covered by other funds. And this is also something that we would like to be expressed in the plans. So that is it from me. I'm very happy to reply to your questions afterwards. Here on this slide, I just put a few links, for instance, to subscribe to the Just Transition Platform newsletter. This is how you will get the invitation of the event, but also a link to a staff working document that we published in September on the territorial Just Transition plans, which basically gives much more details of everything that I explained already. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Sander. That was very interesting food for thought, and I'm sure it will be reflected in the questions. I already see some coming up. I will now go to the third and last speaker, Hubert Strauss, who's a lead economist in the European Investment Bank. He's in the Regional Development Division of the Projects Directorate, and he works on several topics within the EIB, including project appraisals and also looking at long-term lending policies of the EIB. He has worked previously in the European Commission, so he's no stranger to Brussels, in the Director General for Economic Affairs, and also in the OECD. And I would like to give you the floor and with a question. So how can the EIB help public and private actors in core regions?
Yes, many thanks, Nicolas. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. And thanks to Sander for having wonderfully prepared the ground on giving this overview of and the strategic importance of the territorial just transition plans. So some things I was planning to show can go a bit faster. So how is the EIB group going to support the just transition mechanism? Our board of directors approved a comprehensive proposal to that effect last December, and we are probably going to publish a public summary of the board note at the end of April or early May, where you can see the summaries. But today is an opportunity to show you the highlights of this proposal. Now, I hope the slide moves. This is yeah, okay, I will use the arrows, sorry. So for those who don't know us yet, I will quickly give a glance over what the EIB is, then present you our two most important policy pillars that are shaping the new EIB, which is the energy lending policy and the climate bank roadmap, which are really behind everything we are doing today. Then quickly summarize our approach to just transition, and then show you how we support the JTM. So the EIB is the Bank of the European Union. Its shareholders are the 27 member states. The European Commission has a permanent and strong voice on the board of directors, but the voters are the 27 member states. Last year, every year we provide financing to the tune of 60 billion in new signatures, more or less. We are the leading provider of climate finance. And our policy objectives include the support to innovation, infrastructure, sustainable energy, SMEs and mid-caps, and as horizontal policy objectives, climate action and cohesion. Let's look at the EIB lending, the lending to EU member states in the past year. We had 47.8 billion in new signatures. That does not include the guarantee we've signed for the COVID SME guarantee. Now, concerning the four vertical, yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, but I think the slides don't move.
Okay.
They have frozen.
They are frozen. So you should now see EIB public policy goals. You don't see the fourth slide yet, do you?
I see your first slide, unfortunately.
Okay, I'm sorry. In this case, I propose that I stop sharing my screen and you put up the presentation, and I will tell you when to move the slide. I'm very sorry about this.
No problem.
Maybe it has to do with the connection.
No problem. I will do that in a moment.
Yeah, maybe I can already continue. So we have these four vertical public policy goals, and all our lending is supporting one or several of these public policy goals, and these add up to 100%. And these public policy goals are innovation, digital and human capital. That's the first one. Secondly, sustainable energy and natural resources. The third is sustainable cities and regions. that concerns urban and regional infrastructure, basically. The fourth is SMEs and mid-caps. So we are at slide number 4 right now. And on top of these vertical objectives, yes, thank you very much, we have the horizontal or cross-cutting public policy goals. The first is climate action and environmental sustainability. 25 billion of our new signatures within the EU in 2021 contributed directly to this horizontal goal. That's 52% of all signatures. And this is actually already the mark that we promised to achieve by 2025 under the Climate Bank roadmap. And really in the DNA of the European Investment Bank since its creation in 1958 is the support to economic and social cohesion, which means lending to regions or to promoters in regions where the per capita GDP is lower than the EU average. So that's less developed regions and transition regions. And last year, 41% of our EU lending went to those regions. And that compares favorably with those regions' share in economy-wide investment in the EU, which is actually much lower, it's 33%. So we do make a difference with the geographic structure of our lending. Now we can move to the next slide. I was talking about the 2 major policy changes that the EIB underwent over the last 3 years. The first one is the new energy lending policy. The EIB decided to stop supporting traditional fossil fuels. And that's a game change. We have been criticized by some countries for that, but this is a radical step, and we absolutely are convinced that we are standing on the right side of history. The energy policy, lending policy, then has 4, let's say, major windows in what we still do support. That's innovation in energy efficiency and renewable energy. Then second, more wind and solar power, as well as cross-border electricity connections to stabilize the provision of energy. Third, the advances in energy storage, electric vehicles and green transport. And last but not least, to improve energy production outside the EU and ensure that people have electricity in their homes. So that's the development angle. If you move to the next slide, Nicolas, I show you the next big step change, which happened in 2020, at the end of 2020, when the board of directors approved the Climate Bank roadmap of the EIB group. The roadmap applies from 2021 to 2025, by which time we want to be the climate bank. And there are 5 main action programs, let's say. All of our business since 2021 has been aligned with the goals of the Paris Agreement. Paris alignment has been a big bank-wide project in everything we do, and I can feel it in my everyday's work when appraising projects with regions in Europe. The second is, and that's where Just Transition also sits, is to accelerate the transition to a green economy. The third is prioritize innovation and digitalization to cut carbon emissions. The fourth is more support for sustainable agriculture, forestry, bioeconomy, green cities, renewable energy, and low carbon transport. And the fifth is to prepare people and businesses for climate change happening right now, which is the climate change adaptation angle. Make infrastructure and people fit to withstand the severe impacts of climate change. Now, I said that Just Transition was part of the acceleration of the transition to a green economy. We should avoid one misunderstanding here, and Sander really made this already very clear, and I'm grateful for that. Just Transition is not just about the energy transition. We can also accelerate the transition to a low carbon economy by helping those regions that are most dependent on high carbon emitting activities or on fossil fuel mining. And this is where you can see on the next step that the understanding of a just transition, and here we are fully aligned with the European Commission, if you move to the next slide, is really a broad one. So of course, the obvious energy transition is part and parcel of that. But even a coal region with little sun and with little wind will have a just transition program, because there are so many other things to tackle in regions that have to go out of coal and high emission industries such as steel or paper production, or have to transform these production lines to make them less CO2 emitting. So you have the environmental transition. Huge investments are needed, and we are already supporting some of these at the EIB. For example, environmental rehabilitation in the Lausitz-Lusatia region, or the whole urban renewal in the Enschede, in North Rhine-Westphalia. And so we have big programs, and these are really cost-intensive projects. Then, as Sander stressed several times, labor market and skills, training, reskilling, upgrading, to manage the reallocation of the workforce, because experience shows that in the short run there might be more jobs lost than you can create new ones. But this is why you need that policy intervention to help accelerate the process of getting the workers to new occupation. And maybe sometimes when you discuss only with energy experts, everyone seems to think that coal miners should become renewable energy experts. Of course, it's wonderful if they can, but not all of them will be employed in renewable energies. Some will be needed elsewhere in the economy. So we should really look at the whole labor market of a region or of a country. Of course, infrastructure redevelopment, the infrastructure you need for a digital economy in the 21st century is not the same as the one you need in a coal mining region that only does coal mining and steel production. So you need broadband, you need new modern transport connections, and you need also to change the electricity network as you change the electricity production. And finally, economic diversification, as already mentioned by Sander. You need to apply the wider development dimension. And of course, you need this all very well. You know this all very well as you are from these coal mining regions. And we all know that this is easier to say than to do. So this is why we are now zooming in to how concretely we could support the just transition mechanism as the EIB. If you move to the next slide. So as Sander said, the just transition mechanism comes in 3 pillars. Sander has already described the first pillar, which is a cohesion policy fund, mainly grants-based, with EU co-financing rates depending on the development level of regions. For example, public sector schemes in less developed regions would be able to finance up to 85% of the investment cost from the EU grant under the Just Transition Fund. The EIB in richer regions, the EU co-financing rate is lower. So here, what the classical mode of support of the EIB is, and we have a lot of experience in this, EU co-financing the European Regional Development Fund and the European Social Fund. We do it with many EU regions and with many EU countries, especially in Southern and Eastern Europe, Central and Eastern Europe. And so the EIB can co-finance the national co-financing obligations under these funds. And our idea is to use the synergies with a region where we are anyway supporting the ERDF. We could also support the Just Transition Mechanism investments in if that region hosts a most affected NUTS 3 region, a most affected territory. Pillar 2 is the Just Transition Scheme under InvestEU. So here the focus is on green, sustainable infrastructure, the 4 windows basically, innovation, social and skills, SMEs and microfinance. And maybe important to say that there is not really a ring-fenced budget within InvestEU for Just Transition, but there are a few, let's say, incentives to select projects in just transition most affected territories. And one of those incentives I am aware of is that there is a slightly different state aid treatment for SMEs in the just transition most affected territories, so that the rate of state support can be a little bit higher than in another region, and this could be could help the absorption of InvestEU guarantees for projects in just transition regions. Finally, the pillar 3. From an EIB perspective, certainly the most important pillar, it's the public sector loan facility, whereby EIB financing is blended with an EC grant. The EIB is initially the only implementing partner. More implementing partners might be selected by the European Commission if and when more budgetary resources were available, for example, from changes to the emission trading system. But this is early days to say this. I will get in a minute to what's available under Pillar 3 and how this works. Maybe important to know that under each pillar, the EIB has also a battery of advisory services available. JASPERS, the Joint Action for Support of Projects in European Regions, is supporting member states with the screening and preparation of pillars of projects, mainly with a view to obtaining funding from the Just Transition Fund, Pillar 1. Then we have the InvestEU Advisory Hub, which is happy to help you even if you don't know yet where your project would fit and which type of EU support it could possibly obtain. So the hub is able to dispatch your questions and your advisory needs to different services in the bank, or to organize advice themselves. And they can deal with, for example, in potential investments under InvestEU, or also prepare projects that could later be part of a loan that gets a public sector loan facility, a Pillar 3 grant. So in the Pillar 3, in the public sector loan facility, the budget is relatively limited. It's 1.5 billion roughly, but it's interesting to know that 35 million from that Pillar 3 budget is reserved for advisory support, capacity building with regional promoters, and also project preparation and implementation support. Now, let's zoom a little bit further into the individual pillars, if I may. So under the Just Transition Fund, the most important has said 17.5 billion in grants. That's 2018 prices. Sander showed current prices, so we are aligned. There is no real difference. And as Sander said, the money from Next Generation EU needs to be committed relatively fast. So that those 10 billion, they need to be really, let's say, you need to know what to do with them relatively soon. That was the purpose of Next Generation EU. All the member states benefit from the Just Transition Fund, not only those that are still active in coal mining. The territorial just transition plans, they are very important, and I think Sander has covered it all. The EU financing, co-financing under the cohesion policy. So we could help with these structural program loans, whereby we would support you in funding your own national co-financing obligations, but we could also think of setting up decentralized financial instruments. Finally, the EU co-financing rates are, as you know, 85% for less developed regions, 70% for transition regions, and 50% for more developed regions of eligible investment cost. So there is a little bit of headroom for the EIB in less developed regions, a little bit more in transition regions. What do I mean by that? You may not know, but the EIB has a self-imposed commitment to limit the joint co-financing of EU plus EIB to 90% of the project investment costs in less developed and transition regions. The idea behind is to oblige our clients to have skin in the game, to really have a little contribution from their own ready and set up. Now, we try to reach out to you through enhanced dialogue with public authorities. JustBus already supports the origination of just transition operations in 6 countries, and we try to maximize synergies with existing products, such as the co-financing of the ERDF, for example. And we want to promote our EIB group experience with decentralized financial instruments. The European Investment Fund also has a lot of experience with financial instruments in the area of SME support, SME guarantees. Now, in the interest of time, let's move on to the next slide. So this is just an overview of how as per the regulation, the JTF grant budget in 2018 prices is distributed over the member states. You can find that in Annex 1 of the JTF regulation. Let's move on. Now, under InvestEU, as I said, we can support projects in any of the 4 windows, but you would need to make sure, if you're a project promoter or you have one of the firms in your region, enterprise in your region is a project promoter, to make sure the link to your Just Transition narrative. As per the Just Transition Fund regulation, you need to already list in your territorial just transition plans a rough overview of sectors and activities and policy priorities for those projects you intend to support with InvestEU and with the public sector loan facility, so that everyone is clear from the outset of how you channel your support across the 3 pillars in addressing the challenges in your regions. And I think the other I have already said. Let's move on to the next pillar, the public sector loan facility. So the details are yet to be confirmed. As you prepare the territorial just transition plans, the EIB services and the Commission services are working on an interinstitutional agreement that will look at the details, but already as per the public sector loan facility regulation that is already in force, a certain sequence of things has been agreed. And when you have a project, and in order to get a project, EIB advisory can help you to prepare the project to make it mature for application to EIB financing. The idea we are currently discussing is that because the 2 processes, applying for the grant and applying for the loan, are separate processes, that you would apply for the grant by responding to one of the calls that the European Commission will launch later this year or early next year, and then the Commission services would do a first screening, and the EIB services would then work as quickly as we can. You know, our appraisal processes, they are very thorough on those, let's say, more promising projects, on those screened in projects. And the grant can be awarded only once the EIB governing bodies have approved the loan, and as the loan has been signed as per the public sector loan facility regulation. This is a prerequisite for the grant award. The project could still go ahead even if the grant was rejected. The EIB loan could still be given, but of course your whole financing calculation, your financing plan would then change. So that's in a nutshell. The sequence, how it would work. As I said, there's 1.5 billion budget from the European Commission, and we are supposed to lend up to 10 billion over the period of 2021 to 2027. Maybe good to know that until 2025, this budget of 1.5 billion is reserved for every member state according to the same quota that you also have for the Just Transition Fund. So if you are fast enough to get projects on the rail that can apply until 2025 for a grant under the Pillar 3, then your country secures the budget. For the budget that hasn't been used by the end of 2025, it will then go to first come, first serve, and to the best applicants. So there's these two stages in the life of the public sector loan facility. Until the end of 2025, there's national quotas, and afterwards there's free quotas. So that's the Pillar 3. And I think if we want to have time for Q&A, I should stop here. I had a few slides on advisory, but if you have questions on advisory, maybe we can reserve these slides for the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hubert. Very interesting presentation, and there are a lot of tools available from the EIB side. I would like to, go to questions. And what I propose is I saw there was one first question from Gloria Popescu. It's from Romania. It's this one I think is for Sander. It's about the coverage of how the Just Transition Fund works at regional level. Have you seen the question, Sander? Maybe I can pose it to you.
Yes,
and,
I have it here. I don't know if the other participants see it, but basically the management of the Just Transition Fund is not at NUTS 3 level necessarily. It really depends on the member state. It can be at the national level even, although in most cases it will be at a regional level, and depending on the member state, it will be a NUTS 3 or a NUTS 2 region. So this will be different across member states. And then the question was also on the state aid intensity. So first of all, I want to say I'm not a state aid expert myself, but in the staff working document that I referred to earlier, we explained this a little bit as well. So in fact, the state aid, when it comes to regional aid, the percentage of aid that is allowed depends on the type of territory according to the regional aid maps. This is also at NUTS 3 levels, so not at NUTS 2 level. And indeed, there are some circumstances where JTF regions, and this is why the territorial just transition plans are also important for that state aid element, where they are allowed a slightly higher aid. But I would prefer referring to the staff working document there for the details.
Thank you, Sander. I take advantage to ask another question to you. From my side, you mentioned that member states are submitting now their plans, and that there's a first tranche, a first set that have already submitted it. So do you how do you see the process? Well, when do you think the plans will start to be approved or ready? Do you have a timeline for the newcomers and for the?
We have estimates, but basically it depends on how long the member state, how much time they take between receiving our comments and then resubmitting the revised versions. Optimistically, there would be the first DJTPs that we can adopt still in April or in May. So there are several of the member states that I showed on that slide where we, the Commission, have sent our observations officially as early as January. And so as soon as the member states resubmit the plans, let's say if we are happy with everything, we can adopt almost immediately. So it depends really on how quickly the member state revises, but also, of course, the quality. So if they, if they reply to all of our concerns, then we can go ahead quite quickly. In fact, in cohesion policy more broadly, we already adopted the first programs. These are actually cross-border cooperation programs that we already adopted in the past weeks. And in the next couple of weeks, we will really start adopting more and more mainstream programs, as we call it, ERDF and Cohesion Fund programs mostly. And then perhaps already in April or May, the first JTF programs. But on the other hand, there are member states for whom we have not seen one page of any draft of anything. So for these member states, it is really not likely that anything would be adopted before the summer or much later. And this is how it always goes. Yeah. So this is not exceptional, or this is not specific to the Just Transition Fund. This is how it works. But it has to be then also stressed that the projects are eligible from the 1st of January of 2021. Yeah, so as soon as the programs are adopted, the expenditure already from the first day of the multi-annual financial framework period are eligible.
Okay. And just very quick related to that, on the Next Generation EU, I understand the expenditure has to be fixed by 2023, the end of the year. Would that be your hard deadline for?
Yes, that's the regulatory deadline. That's the deadline for the commitment. So the spending of that part is end of December 2026.
Okay. And yes.
Just a very short question, because I think Sandra will leave us in a couple of minutes. You mentioned that the skills dimension is underdeveloped. I think it's important topic for our partners as well. What do you mean by this? Like, is it too less actions offered, or are the quality weak? You know, just to know what is meant by that, so that we can learn from.
Yes,
from that.
It's a comment, let's say, that we on average, so it's not true for all of the plans, but in some of the plans, and I speak of the first versions that we saw, when we say the skills dimension is underdeveloped, is that actually there has been very little effort to identify social impacts. So some of the plans focus very much on technology needs that the industry has in hydrogen or whatever flashy kinds of things, without really elaborating what the human dimension is. And the skills is one important aspect of this human dimension. So in fact, this has been a weakness that we observed from the start, that just the identification of these impacts is lacking, and then of course as well the investments that accompany it. But this is something that for us is really a red line. We don't accept plans that do not have this dimension. So yes, I think in some cases member states had some trouble with data, or just that they were not used to developing, or the authorities that we talk to, let's say, were not used to developing these aspects, but we are working a lot on it with them, and together with the colleagues of DG Employment, of course. There are several studies that we undertook also to help them. One of the sessions of the event in May will also be fully focused on that. So we really hope that in the final versions, this dimension is much improved, because for us, this is really one of the key issues. The Just Transition Fund is not there just to support companies. It's really there to support the people and the places. So this dimension is for us essential.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. If I may, yes. On the same question. Yeah, on the same question, Rita, what we really also see from regional statistics on continuing training and lifelong learning is that in some of those regions that are most affected by the decarbonization, there is very, very low demand for any training and continuing education to start with. So we have a very difficult starting position, and I think neither the Commission nor the EIB will be able to decrete lifelong learning from the top. This has to come from the ground, and member state governments really need to support their regions in that respect. We need nothing less than a cultural revolution when it comes to surviving this shock. I mean, in those countries, like in Scandinavian countries, in Germany, France, there is this culture of lifelong learning already, and but in some countries there's just not enough demand to start with, and so it has to come now. And maybe such a shock like getting out of coal mining would be could be the launch of such a rethink of the strategy. I think there was one question on the advisory services, if from Gloria. Is that what you were going to say, Nicolas?
Yes, exactly. If you had a couple more minutes, there are two questions, I think. There's also one on state aid that is a bit more complex, but nonetheless important.
Yeah, like Sander, I'm not an expert on state aid. I'm a consumer of state aid rules, let's say, in order to help our clients on the ground. So I do not have a good answer here, but the idea I already gave in my talk. The idea is that in some of the identified most affected territories, and mostly that's not 3 regions, there will be a possibility for SMEs to have a 10% higher state aid allowed under the regulation than in the other regions. And the state aid regulation is more granular than the cohesion map. And from what I understood is that by June 2022, all the member states will need to have published their new state aid maps, because there are new state aid rules, that are regional aid rules that apply from 2022 to 2027. And as they come on stream, as they are published, believe me, we are rushing on them. We're trying to understand the map. We cross it with the EEC cohesion map, with the EU cohesion map. And then, of course, we are very eager to know what the final list of just transition most affected territories will be. And with these 3 maps, regional aid map, cohesion map, and just transition map, we will work, and we will see that in which area there will be this slightly higher state aid percentage and which areas not. But this is really a small teaser. I think the more general question is how to support. How can we support regions over and above these state aid questions in getting projects on the rail? And maybe if you have time, it's possible to show my very last slide with 3 useful email addresses, just in case you have further questions, especially the participants from the audience. The Just Transition project planning, not the making of the territorial Just Transition plans, but the project planning. You can see these 2 hyperlinks at the very end. One is the Invest EU Advisory Hub, and the other one is Jaspers, as I said. And Jaspers, and that answers Gloria's questions. We are not really a hotline. So yes, the advisory can be free for member states and for regions, but it's not like a hotline. It's rather that we would enter into a formal agreement on how that would spell out how the support would work. And since I'm not working for Jaspers, but I have very knowledgeable colleagues who are already supporting coal regions in transition, they have worked with the 3 Czech NUTS 3 regions that are covered under the Czech Just Transition mechanism. Then they have dealt with, I think, 6 regions in Poland and with the Slovak lignite areas. So Jaspers is very active. I think there are 6 in 6 member states they have been active, and so it's useful to get in touch with them and with the Invest EU Advisory Hub. Or you may also write an email to me, and I can dispatch your questions. I'm happy to help, of course. And so, yes, in principle, the advisory would be free, but this would be based on an agreement, on a formal agreement. And for example, we are elaborating an agreement with Greece, and we are already looking at transition projects in Western Macedonia. So the talks are pretty advanced, and so we are very active in some of the coal regions already.
Thank you for our replies, and yes, we have also some partners in the call from Western Macedonia, but I see that we run a bit short on time, but I would like to thank you all. And of course, if there are questions to the speakers or any doubts, please let me know. I can help you to set contact if you have any specific request, if that's okay with you, Hubert, if there's any very specific thing. And I would like to invite you all to our closing conference of the TRACER project on the 21st and 22nd of September.
20th and 21st.
Oh, excuse me. Yes, we just fixed the dates last week. Yes, 20th and 21st. And we will send an email on that in a few weeks. And with that, I wish you all a good end of the week. And thank you very much for joining in.
Thank you.
Many thanks for the invitation.
Thank you. I also wanted just to summarize in one sentence that we see that coal regions in transition will have a big structural change, cultural change, cultural revolution, as you said, Hubert, and we need to connect these regions to new opportunities. So I think it's important that our stakeholders now use this opportunity. They have your contacts and the links, and they start looking for these new opportunities, because the ideas are there. There are many active stakeholders in the regions, but sometimes I think they don't know, how to benefit from all this set of available financial tools. So thank you very much also for presenting.
Welcome.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
I wish you.
Thank you, Nicholas.
A good day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Same to you. Goodbye.